We are now ready to move forward. In the independent sleeping, we talked about all the reasons of, sleep dependencies, getting to the root of sleep busters. We talked about the different ideas and formats of crying it out and all these other sleep training methods that I don't like. We talked about this gentle phase out method in a little bit of detail. We talked about the theory behind it. Now we're going to get to the goods of actually practical application, what you're going to do nights 1 through 3, how you're going to start, and what it is going to look like. Okay, so nights 1 through 3, that's what we're going to be discussing here only in this presentation. When you get to already after the 3rd, 4th night, you're going to want to move on to the next presentation. But you can work at your own pace here, but I don't recommend staying in any phase too long. So this full aspect we're going to be discussing here is right here during nights 1 through 3. Okay, full touch equals full sleep. What does that mean? Okay, that means tonight, night number 1, nights 1 through 3, you are going to give your baby his last bedtime bottle. You are going to give him his last nursing. You're going to give him his cup of milk in a sippy cup, whatever it is, and you're going to place him down in his crib when he's drowsy but awake. That means if he falls asleep, usually at bedtime, being held or being rocked or being fed, you want to stop while he's still aware of his surroundings, cognitively aware he's being put down, but really sleepy. Like if you would continue rocking or holding or feeding him, he'd fall asleep in another few minutes, but you want to catch him at that place before he's asleep, but really super relaxed, almost ready to go to sleep. And what you're going to do is you're going to place him down in his crib when he's semi-aware of his surroundings, but really drowsy, but still awake. Now, what's going to happen when you put him down in his crib? He's going to go a little nuts. He's going to scream. He's going to cry. He's going to protest. And that's why we talked about all the ideas of what that crying means right now, because he's confused. He doesn't know what's going on. But what you're going to do, and make sure that you have that trust with him. Make sure he feels emotionally secure, is aware of your presence. You're responding to him, everything with the theory. You are going to use full touch, to use any means possible to help him fall asleep. You can rub his back, you can sing to him, you can even rock the crib if you want, if that helps. I want you to do whatever you can to help him to sleep, but there are a few rules that we're going to do with this aspect. And then we're just talking about bedtime. We're going to move through progressively the rest of the night first, but this is just bedtime. A few rules. Number 1. When you're there at bedtime, you do not take him out of his crib. If you just take him out of his crib and start holding him to sleep when he protests, that's just reinforcing his behavior. Okay, when I cry, mommy picks me up. No, he stays in his crib and he doesn't come out. Okay. Number 2, you don't go into his crib. I know that sounds crazy, but I have to say this because I worked with someone who did. She had a really big, sturdy, oak wood crib, and she literally would go in there. That doesn't help. That's just in essence creating a big bed for the two of you. We want him to stay in his crib, you to stay out of his crib, using any means possible, rubbing his back, touching his hand, holding him, doing whatever you can. And number 3, not feeding him. Don't feed him. Don't hand him his bottle if he seems upset. Don't give him his sippy cup. Don't give him that because he just ate. We just gave him his bedtime feeding before he went to sleep. And he's not hungry. We don't want to have any extra dependencies aside from your help to help him fall asleep. Now, full touch other than that can mean really whatever you want. The goal here is that your baby is responded to whatever way that he likes, whatever makes him happy. You don't have to do something. If he screams when you touch his back, my goodness, don't do it. But I want him to feel secure and know that you're 100% there. Remember, he's not abandoned. He's not traumatized. You're right there with him and you're helping him, doing no matter what, you're staying there with him so he feels great and he feels secure. He might not look great. He might seem upset, but he feels internally that real emotional security. You can hug him while he still stays in the crib, but he's not sleeping. You want to catch him at that point where he's not yet sleeping, that ideal state. So holding his hand, doing whatever you can to make sure he feels loved, even if he seems like he's screaming and he's really, really upset. You want to do whatever you can. Now, most common thing, you're probably wondering right now, okay, Batya, how long do I let this go? Do I do it for 10 minutes? Half an hour? 4 hours? I'm going to tell you something from an honest place of wanting to help you and knowing that this will work, having done this for a very, 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 very long time, okay? There is no cap on bedtime. If I told you after a certain amount of time you could just take him out, again, that's just reinforcing his behavior. He's not going to cry for 3 hours. He's not going to cry for 4 hours, but it could potentially be an hour, hour and a half, okay? That means that you stay with him, helping him fall asleep with as much physical, verbal reassurance as possible with all these rules. not taking him out, you not going in, not feeding him, okay? So it's really critical to have that moment mantra handy, like I told you, so you can stay positive and do whatever you can to get into that groove of ultimate positivity, believing in your baby, believing in yourself, believing he can do this, okay? So that is bedtime. Now, anytime he wakes up throughout the night, you're going to repeat this gentle phase out method, unless it's a time we've designated for a nursing or a bottle, which we're going to get to in a minute, okay? Anytime you hear him, unless it's one of these delegated feeding times that we're going to get to in the next slide, anytime he wakes up, I want you to respond to him right away. Don't leave him to scream for 10 minutes before you come. We want him to know when I cry, my parent comes to me right away and responds to me right away. We want him to learn that you come and he can respect and really rely on the fact that you're going to be there, because we don't want to play guessing games. Is she here? Is she not here? What's going on? Okay? So you go right away and you stay with your baby until he's in a deep, deep sleep. Okay, whether it's bedtime, whether it's the middle of the night, whether you're doing bedtime or any night waking, other than these feeding times we'll get to in a minute, I want you to stay with your baby till he's in a deep sleep. That means if he falls asleep holding your hand or he falls asleep with you rubbing his back, that's fine. And I would even recommend staying a good 5-10 minutes after you feel like he's in a really deep sleep to make sure that he's really, really, really fully asleep and you don't sneak out and the whole process starts again, okay? Now, make sure that this is working. One family I worked with had their baby learn to fall asleep with actually one eye open, okay? Because he was so nervous that the parents would leave before he was in a deep sleep. Let's not even get there. It's all about trust. Stay there with your baby till he's in a nice deep sleep so he can know that you're going to stay there, okay? Anytime he wakes up, other than the feeding times, throughout the whole night, you repeat this phase of full touch, okay? All the way until the morning. Now, morning can mean whenever you designated morning when your baby generally wakes up, that you worked on foundation week 1 of getting that routine set up. Usually it's somewhere around the 6-7 a.m. bracket, but anytime before that, respond immediately, give as much touch as he needs, and only take him out, start your day at that 6-7 a.m. time when it rolls around with everything, okay? Now, foundation here is key. Just like this pyramid, it's only as strong as its base, okay? That's there. So this gentle phase out method you are enlisting at this stage in the game, only starting at bedtime and the nights. During this initial first week of independent sleeping, okay? That means during the day, you can still do whatever you need to make sure naps happen. Naps can still happen. However, being held in the stroller, I just want to keep that nap structure solidly in place. So this gentle phase out method, you are only enlisting for bedtime and the nights, right? When that nap happens next day, you go right back to however, wherever. Just make sure the nap happens to make sure that your baby doesn't get overtired. Because if we start doing this all day, all night, you're going to get drained, you're going to get burnt out, and your baby's going to scream all day, and it's going to be a disaster. It's going to get more overtired, fight bedtime, forget it, okay? So we want to make sure that we have that structure set up. So the foundation of just doing this for bedtime, just doing it for nights is the key right now to make sure that the daytime structure stays in place, okay? Now, while doing this, I want you to find your own sleep station, okay? I want you to find a consistent place that you are comfortable in to ensure that what you're doing sticks. I don't want you sitting on a backless stool, bending over your baby's crib for hours. So, you tell me the next morning that you've taken Tylenol because your back hurts. No, set yourself up to be comfortable. Some parents like to sit in a rocking chair next to the baby. Some parents like to put, their hands through the slate of the crib. Others like to lay on a mattress on the floor, so they're always there. I don't care what you do. And we're going to call this place that you are your sleep station. I just want to make sure it's consistent. I don't want your baby to sometimes see you on the chair, sometimes see you on the floor, sometimes see you on the guest bed, whatever it is. I want your baby to know where to expect to see you. So it's all about consistency from all fronts here. It's about setting things up in a way that you are comfortable so you can stick with it. Because if you're not physically comfortable, the likelihood is you're not going to stick with whatever you're doing. Okay? Now let's talk about feedings in the night. Okay? I talked about anytime the baby wakes up repeating this process, but if your baby doesn't eat in the night, then this slide will not apply to you. But if you have a baby that's nursing frequently throughout the night or having a bunch of bottles or having water or having sippy cups of milk, this part's going to be really important for you because you can't just go cold turkey, all right? Habit and hunger are very directly correlated. Just because your baby might not to eat, every 3-4 hours, may not need to eat that frequently, his body has trained itself to think that he does. So if you just suddenly uproot that, that's not fair to him. If you and I would set an alarm at 3 a.m., for a week and make ourselves a grilled cheese sandwich, what would happen? after a week at 3 a.m., we would actually wake up hungry, even though our bodies don't need it. So we can't just say, sorry, buddy, 12 hours straight, we're not feeding you at all, when his body's used to eating 2, 3, 4 hours intervals throughout the night. We want to do this gently and slowly get his body acclimated to lasting longer. So this is where we start. If, for example, your baby can go 4 hours during the day between nursings or bottles or things like that, that's a good place to start, because it's safe to assume if your baby can go 4 hours during the day, he can go 4 hours during the night. So set things up in a way where we're gradually spacing out that chunk of sleep when you're sleeping. So if your baby, let's say, goes to bed at 7 p.m., okay, 20, 30 minutes each way, but approximately most bedtimes around the 7:30 mark, you do this whole gentle phase out method at bedtime with full touch. And you want to set the first time that you are allowed to feed your baby is somewhere around the 10:30, 11 mark. Okay, that means if your baby wakes up anytime before 10:30 or 11, you repeat the gentle phase out method, full touch, full singing, full cuddling. And anytime your baby wakes up after 10:30, 11, you're fine to feed him straight away. I'm not telling you to wake him up. I'm just saying the earliest time he can eat is 10:30 or 11. Anytime he wakes up after, you can feed him straight away. Same thing for the rest of the night. Let's say you pick the next one to be around 1:30 or 2 a.m. Again, anytime your baby wakes up before 1:30, 2 a.m., repeat the gentle phase out method. Give him opportunity to learn how to fall asleep with as much of your reassurance as possible, with as much of you being there as possible. Anytime he wakes up after 2 or 1:30, whatever time you've set, fine to feed him straight away. So you never wake him up, but you have set times to know never to feed him before. So I don't know if you're going to set yourself up to do 2 feedings in the night or 3 feedings. Base it on what your baby's currently doing. If your baby wakes up every hour and has 6-ounce bottles every hour, you can't suddenly go to 2. You'll probably have to start at 3 every few hours and then bump it down to 2. We'll talk about that as you move through. But pick a time that's slightly out of your baby's comfort zone, but not pushing him too much, because remember that hunger is painful for a baby and you want to do whatever you can to help him. So if you're starting at 3 times or 2 times, around 10:30, 11, around 2, sometime around 5 a.m., anytime your baby wakes up before those times, repeat the gentle phase out method. Do not pick him up, do not feed him, keep all those rules in place, touch him, love him. Anytime he wakes up after those times, you're fine to feed him straight away, okay? But there are a few rules we have to keep in mind with this whole idea. Number 1 is the 5-second rule, okay? As we discussed, we don't want to just reinforce your baby's crying. And let's say your baby has woken up at, a half hour close to one of these feeding times. Let's say your baby wakes up at 10 and you're doing the gentle phase out method and you're cuddling and you're kissing and you're touching, staying in his crib, but 10 slowly turns into 10:15, slowly turns into 10:30. What do you do now? It's time to feed him. We've decided that 10:30 is the time you're doing it. What do? You don't just want to pick him up and feed him, because we're trying to weaken and break that association of crying and being immediately fed, right? We're trying to teach him, no, we go back to sleep. We don't get nursed or bottles back to sleep. So what you do, if the time arises, or if this happens, between 1:30 and 2, or between 4:30 and 5, if the time slowly approaches that it's time for your baby to eat, but your baby's awake and you've been doing this gentle phase out method, I want you to enlist the 5-second rule. Now what that means is as follows. All right, your baby wakes up, let's say at 1:30, and 2 a.m. is the time you've designated to feed him. You don't just pick him up when 2 a.m. comes. What I want you to do is walk to the other end of the room, walk out of the room, count to 5 in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then go back in, pick him up, give him his bottle, and start anew. So it helps him at least make some differentiation between crying and being immediately picked up. And you only do this if you're doing the gentle phase out method and the time slowly approaches in which he needs to eat. Now, this might sound totally crazy and draining to do, but if you stick with this and list everything else throughout this whole first week and second week of going through the slides here, you're going to see awesome results, but we still want to make sure your baby is fed. Okay, that's rule number 1, 5-second rule. Next rule is the spouse help rule, okay? It's really important that you don't overstimulate your baby by having your spouse or your partner or your friend or whoever's helping you, by the two of you going in and out of the room, switching, you being with him for 5 minutes, switching and being in and out, because remember I told you this all works through consistent messages over and over and over. And if you switch that around too much, you're going to get totally overstimulated. I don't want your child to cry and learn if he cries hard enough, he gets X or Y parent, or if he cries hard enough, he gets this person. We want it to be consistency of taking the control in a gentle way by giving him that really utmost confidence, but a really predictable message. So let's say your baby falls, let's say you're doing bedtime, okay, tonight. And let's say mom is doing bedtime and she's sitting there at 7 p.m., put him in, followed all the instructions, and is doing this full touch of the gentle phase out method. Touching, rubbing his back, holding his hand, singing to him, and he's angry, angry, angry. And 7 turns into 7:15, turns into 7:45. It's almost 8 o'clock, and mom is about to pull her hair out. I can't sit here anymore. I'm really trying to keep on to my moment mantra bhatya, but it's getting really, really hard. I'm losing it. At that point, it is way too overstimulating, mixed message, confusing if you switch with someone else. So I don't care if whoever, if you want to switch off sleep sessions, but whoever starts each sleep session should be the one to finish it. So mom, you got to sit there between 7 until he falls asleep. But let's say he finally falls asleep at 8, then wakes up again at 8:30. Then another person, your spouse, your partner, or your helper, whoever it is, can go in and be with the baby because it's a new sleep session. Whoever starts each one should be the one to finish it. I don't want in the middle of a sleep session partners switching between themselves, talking to one another, going in, going out, too confusing. So sometimes families like to switch off first half of the night, second half of the night. If you're nursing, then sometimes parents like to do anytime close to a nursing, the mom will do it because as much as dad tries, he can't nurse the baby. Sometimes parents like to switch every other night. I don't care how you do it as long as you're not being confusing to your baby. And if your baby's in your bedroom, same thing. The one who's doing it should be the one awake and actively there, and the other person could just kind of be quietly sleeping in the room. It's just really important that you're doing that. So that's the second rule. Third rule is the stand up, sit down rule. Okay, now in this age bracket, it's very possible your baby is going to be standing up and sitting down and sitting up and sitting down and doing all these things. So right now, you don't want to have any power struggles happening here. So at this stage in the game, you can just keep laying your baby down, doing whatever you can to help him. Every time he gets back up, laying him back down. In the next slide, when we get to the next step of everything, this is going to get a little bit more complicated. But for right now, don't worry. If your baby stands up or sits up, just lay him back down and keep doing it over and over and over and over, even if he's a little jack in the box, because you are fully touching him and fully helping him. Okay? So that's a rundown of this first part of the gentle phase out method. If you need to watch it again to make sure you're clear on it, do that. But do whatever you can to help him. It's full touch, fully helping, keeping all those rules in mind, him staying in his crib, you not going in his crib and not feeding him unless it's those times that you're feeding him. If your baby doesn't need to eat already in the night, then obviously it means the whole night. But I want you to be confident. I want you to write up that moment mantra and I want you to stick with it so you are positive and have a game plan. Because I'm telling you, if you do this for a solid 3-4 nights, your baby's going to get over the hump and move and progress forward to sleep full nights and restful nights.